Hello, this is Tim Law with Playing It Forward Coaching, always encouraging your self-reliance. If you develop a marketable skill, chase that skill with a solid work ethic, always go the extra mile, develop people and communication skills, you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish here in this country. A big thank you to over 550 people that have subscribed to this channel, Playing It Forward Coaching. If you haven't already, please do so. I'd super appreciate it. I got a guy that I was able to catch up with just recently, a couple weeks ago. We're having a celebration of life for my uncle and his grandfather in upstate New York, Canisius Lake and Wayland, New York. Blake Ferry, who guess would be a second cousin of mine. His dad and I are first cousins. So welcome, Blake. Tell us a little bit about your story and what you got going on in your life.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks. I enjoyed meeting you as well. It was great to experience that celebration of life, ceremony, weekend, reconnecting. Really enjoyed it. So happy to be here. You and I spoke briefly about what you're doing. I think it's positive, and I think it's a message that needs to be out there, especially for developing minds to pick up on it and get the guidance that's required to navigate the landscape. I myself have always found comfort and interest and desire and passion, through the vehicle of sport. I've been an athlete my entire life. It has basically built the framework as to how I problem solve, how I, discipline myself, and really how I apply myself. I began, as a young child growing up through school with the kind of the big three: the baseball, basketball, football.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my three sports of choice. I had a lot of moving around in my early years. Parents divorced at a young age. So subsequently, I was never able to stay committed to a particular program. It just seemed like every time I would get to a place where I made the starting lineup, or I became the top two, top three in a position, I would move, and then all of the seniority would go with it, and I would have to start over again. So ultimately what this did for me as I grew up and experienced, different programs and different sports and different regions, is it really gave me a checklist of what I was going to create in terms of a reality for my children. And that was the big takeaway for me. Mm-hmm. So, growing up, playing football, playing baseball, playing basketball through early parts of high school. And then I had a couple of years where I was a sailor, and I was living in Toronto with my father, and I played and sailed. I played football, I played rugby, played basketball, and then I did a couple of summers at RCYC there in Toronto on Center Island, and did really well with sailing. Actually went to an Olympic qualifier, qualified 6th in Canada. Mm-hmm. On my final race, I had a boat failure and my boat sunk. Otherwise, I would have qualified for the Atlanta Olympics in '96. That was an amazing experience. And it really taught me, I think in sports, there's two big paths. One is learning how to function and be productive in a group. And the other is the self-reliance and discipline of becoming an individual athlete and not having anyone else to rely on or lean on. So I pursued both paths. The rewards and the insights and the education that they, awarded me throughout my years was immense. You have to learn how to function in a group, and you got to learn how to take care of yourself, right? And after sailing and then going through skiing in high school, being exposed to it for the first time, played volleyball for a couple of seasons, had some highlights, ended up moving back to Florida to finish off, my junior and senior years. My parents, one living in Canada, one living in the States down in Florida. And then I got into wrestling, and then I started, fighting Muay Thai, and I became a fighter. And it's amazing what you can learn about yourself. Mm-hmm. You're really tested and you're really pushed.
Sure. And Blake, you also were on the Olympic team for Serbia. Was that
that's very recent. That was just here in the last 5 years.
Wow.
So jumping ahead into the last kind of version of the sports story for me is I'm 45 right now. I'll be 46 here in a couple of months. My kids, I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I had purchased a home in upstate or mid-state, I guess, up in California. I live in Vegas and have been for about 20 years, but I wanted to raise my kids with the access to skiing. So I
Mhm.
bought a house up in Mammoth Lakes, California, got my kids on the snow when they were 3, 4 years old, taught them ski racing, grew up in the culture of having skiing in their life. And I always had this love affair with skiing. And having done that for 4 or 5 years, the kids were getting older. And then I remember this particular, I was 37 at the time. My son was 7, 8 years old. My daughter was 5. And the big thing for me was wanting to find a way to connect with my kids and finding a way to really inspire them.
Mhm.
And I knew that they were in this window of being, very impressionable. Those were seriously formidable years. And I remember that the greatest gift I thought I could ever give my kids was to not be the preaching parent with that puts expectations on their shoulders and then stands back and kind of watches them as they try and navigate this gauntlet of pressure and expectation and strain. Instead, I did something, in a reverse. And I said to my wife, I said, listen, I said, all children are impressionable.
Mhm.
And if we want to bring the best out of them, the best thing we can do as their parents is to create an environment, a culture in which they grow, that they flourish, because the environment that we've created doesn't put limitations upon them, gives them the support they need to take risks, dare to be bold, dare to be different, go big. And it all sets it's all a tone that really was set by my wife and I,
Mhm.
and I told her, I said, listen, I said, children are like goldfish and they will always grow to the size of their tank. And if we raise them in an environment that is free of limitation, I go, we'll be amazed at what our kids can accomplish.
Mhm.
So the first part of that equation was, let me, as their father, lead by example. And that was a big defining moment. I said, having grown up with two parents that were completely uninvolved in my sports growing up, my mother to this day, ironically, you know, the first time my mother ever saw me compete in anything was an Olympic qualifier race for skiing about 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
Wow. Wow.
So we've come full circle as adults.
Mhm.
But when I was young and growing up, both of my parents never caught a single one of my games, never saw me, never supported me. So I knew how much that meant to me, and I knew how much that would mean to my kids to be able to really be involved. So I decided at a cocktail party at my house while my wife and I were entertaining friends and family. And a bottle of wine later, she says, "What do you want to do for your 40th birthday?" And I thought about it for a moment, and I realized that I have an amazingly loving wife. I've got two fantastic children, an incredibly supportive environment that I've created. And I said the best way for me to respect and honor the people that support me in my life is to do something significant with that support. So I looked at my wife and I said, "I'm going to go to the Olympics." And she looked at me like I was crazy. And she says, "You mean like to watch?" I said, "No, I'm going to go and I'm going to compete." And she goes, "What sport?" And this is like the first time this has ever come out of my mouth, but I just felt inspired. And I said, "You know what?" I said, "I'm going to go to the Olympics in ski racing." And I've never ski raced in my life. So, these are some pretty bold statements. And she looks at me and she says, "Ski racing?" She had known that I had never ski raced before. When I was growing up as a kid, the only skiing experience I had was what the kids now call, big mountain skiing. It's backcountry, deep powder, jumping off cliffs, kind of the extreme skiing thing. That was hip when I was growing up in my high school and college years. But I'd never been on a race course before. And let me tell you, that's a pretty far cry from skiing powder. So I say to her that, listen, this is what I'm going to do. And then I just start systematically breaking down what the path is to make it a reality. Well, first of all, who are you going to ski for? Well, it's incredibly unlikely I'm going to be able to qualify for the US Olympic team. That's not very possible. Hold on a second. I'm going to turn this thing. They have it's funny, you can mute your phone, but if it's somebody who's in your favorites, they can call right through it. Anyway, so where are we? So I am, I tell her I'm going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to, my mother is from the former country of Yugoslavia, which is now the nationality. She's now from Serbia, which is the former, member of Yugoslavia. So I come up with the idea that I'm going to form a national ski team for the country of Serbia. I had to still qualify and make top 500 in the world. This is a bold statement. The rules were changed after Eddie the Eagle back in the 80s,
I remember him.
where you could be the best athlete that Ireland or whoever, or Britain or whoever had to offer, and you could Jamaican bobsled team.
Yes,
you could be the best bobsledder from Jamaica, and you would go to the Olympics. And it was as a result of Eddie the Eagle, they changed the rules, and a lot of it was done because these sports have high possibility for injury.
Sure.
And also they wanted to maintain the integrity of the sports. So you could no longer just be the representative of a country. You had to qualify on a global scale to make a top, in ski racing particularly, it's top 500 in the world. So I dig a little bit deeper. I create a ski team for the country of Serbia. I then have to go and really become a true athlete myself. I have to learn the craft. I've got to qualify on a global scale, and the work is real. The sacrifices are real. All of this is I'm standing at the foot of the mountain looking up at it going, okay, now I've called myself out and I'm going to do it. And the other big component to this entire thing, there's no way to, you can't fast track it. You can't, and I wanted to go one step further, because the lesson I'm trying to instill to my kids is there's no workaround for hard work. There's no hack to hard work.
Right.
And the last thing in the world I wanted to do was to, this was not about me making a joke out of this or making a mockery of, look, my dad wrote a check and got to the Olympics, ha, 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 and then go and embarrass myself and make it almost seem like it's some type of a prank. I'm like, no, that's not what it's about. So I decided. I got to turn this thing. Apparently this is not working. Hold on a second. All right, there we go. Power down. So what I decided to do, on top of going to the Olympics for ski racing, is I decided to choose the most dangerous sport in the Olympics, which is downhill. So that was the ultimate. That would be me telling you I've never climbed a mountain in my life. I'm going to climb Everest. People would look at you like, whoa, wait a minute. Aren't there 1,000 other things you need to do first before you decide you want to go climb Everest? But again, I'm trying to prove a point. I'm trying to really, represent the effort with the type of respect it deserves. And also to, I learned at a very early age, and I think this is important for all individuals, is to know thyself. And I knew, and this stems back, and I'm jumping all over the place, but, it stems back into the relationship I have with my wife. I knew when I met my wife that there was nobody that was going to ruin that relationship more than I would. So I had to call myself out on it, and I had to change certain behavior about myself so I didn't sabotage that relationship, because that's what I did in a pattern. Well, this commitment to ski racing is the same thing. Right. So I intentionally chose the most dangerous sport in the Olympics with the most risk, because I knew that it would have all of my attention, all of my commitment. And the byproduct is at 40 years old, I had to be in the best shape of my life. So And this is how I get myself motivated, focused, and committed to a cause.
Mhm.
So I decide to go for it. I then start, and this is just the way I run a business, right? Okay, all right, what do you need? I need coaching. I need guidance. I need an infrastructure. I got to build a team. I mean, the good news about Serbia is I was able to be in control of it because I created the actual team. But
Mhm.
the bad news is I'm on my own.
Mhm.
I had to pay everything out of my own pocket. I had to rely only on myself for resources. They did nothing but grant me a yeah. So in setting up the stage of the ultimate sacrifice, the most dangerous sport in the Olympics, um, the commitment level, building the infrastructure to go ahead and really make this dream a reality, then I had to do the work, and there was no way to avoid that or get around it, and I had to.
There's no shortcuts.
No, there's no, and there, and you're touching on a big point. There's no shortcuts to success.
Yeah.
There really aren't. I mean, there's a reason why every person who's accomplished great things in their fields always end up publishing a book, because their stories, because the journeys are hard, because if you truly accomplish something, worth being proud of, it's a path riddled with sacrifice,
Mhm.
commitment, effort. It's tough.
Yeah.
If this shit was easy, anybody would do it, right? So,
Yeah,
right.
that's true. That's
So,
true.
so then I decide to go to work. Simple as that. I put my head down. I decide I'm going to, all right, make this a reality. And I made myself accountable, because when I told my kids I was going to do this, the last thing in the world I ever wanted to do was to be able to have a follow-up conversation with them that said, your dad made a crazy, comment about trying to do something. In the end, it was too hard. I mean, I put myself in a very tough position where I'm either going to inspire them with this
Mhm.
bold claim that I'm going to show them that anything in the world is possible. But if I, in fact, do not see this thing through, I will teach them that it's okay to quit, that
Mhm.
it's okay to, make unrealistic, bold statements and then not have what it takes to follow through. I mean, you see how this very quickly goes the other route.
Sure.
And nothing is more precious to me, um, than the mind and spirit of my children. That for
Mhm.
me is something I hold incredibly sacred. So now I had to go to work. And, just like I'll use the analogy of, I don't know, baseball, you know what I mean? Nobody goes right to the majors. You start off with t-ball, and then you're in the little league, and then you're
Mhm.
playing high school ball, and then maybe you make it to single A and then double A. And so I literally had to recreate 15 or 20 years worth of ski racing experience that I didn't have, by starting at the bottom and aggressively moving my way all the way up through the ranks until I made it to to what would have been the World Cup.
Mhm.
Um, and it was the most demanding, the most challenging, the most outrageous experience of my life. And I learned more about myself. I put myself in more compromising positions and had to embrace fear at a time in my life when a lot of people are starting to get more conservative.
Mhm.
You start hitting 40, you're not deciding to kind of put yourself in harm's way. And I mean, I'm running down downhill courses at 80, 90 miles an hour,
Wow.
sheer ice, wearing a unitard with a helmet, going off. It's like I look at these ski jumpers that are jumping off, at the Olympics. It's like those guys go off a ski jump at 55 miles an hour with a fixed pitch, with a falling away hill, with
Mhm.
grooves that their skis stay in. I mean, literally, the amount of effort that it takes to maintain that is how well your air awareness is once you're airborne. But
Mhm.
in a downhill course, we'll have not one jump, but we'll have three. They
Mhm.
will put it intentionally at the most inopportune, awkward place imaginable. Like, imagine the launch or the lip of a jump is in the apex of a turn. And then
Well,
imagine you're taking off at 80 miles an hour and your body acting like a shock absorber under full 6, 7 Gs in the middle of a turn. And then you hit a jump where you're going to go 60, 70 meters in the air at 75 miles an hour. So you're taking off 50 to 70% faster than the guys that do ski jumping.
wow.
You're taking off in the middle of a turn, the worst possible time to do so. You repeat it 3 times. I mean, and you're not landing on a beautifully groomed 45-degree sloped hill. You're landing on rocks and ruts and undulating terrain and knolls and bumps and grooves. And I mean, it is the most gnarly, intense thing I've ever had to do. But I was able to bring my kids along for the ride. I was able to share the experience with them and give them a front row seat into living the philosophy of if you can dream it, you can do it. You are truly your own best friend, worst enemy, best supporter. It all starts up here.
Sure. Yeah.
I can't tell you how proud I am to see what that exposure for my kids has done in their developing minds. As they're now reaching into high school, my kids are both at a boarding school in Florida specific to sports. My kids ended up, really using ski racing, and they were phenomenal. My daughter was #1 in her division. My son, when he left ski racing, was #1 in his division. They both were phenomenal ski racers. But with COVID and what happened in the last couple of years, we had to make a pivot since the sports were suspended. And I moved my kids down, and they live in a boarding school in Florida, which is a bubble where they were still doing sports, still doing training. And they ended up pivoting into football and tennis and doing phenomenal. My son just got voted team captain this morning.
Wow, that's great.
We just got the email. So he was, offered a spot on the varsity high school football team as an 8th grader in middle school. And they're the top high school football team in the country.
Wow.
Now I think they're in the top 3, top 4. Some of that is politics because they, all of these different things are skewed when they do the rankings, but whatever, they're the top 5 in the country.
Sure.
And they're a powerhouse school. So we're very fortunate that he was able to.
Well, let me ask you this, Blake. Obviously, I want to kind of conclude things here shortly, because I promised we wouldn't take too much of your time, and this has been wonderful. As far as sports and everything like that, how has that impacted your life and career? I mean, you've done a number of different things, and if you could kind of just see how those life lessons have helped you in those areas, that would be great if you share that.
Listen, it all applies. I think individually we are a sum of our experiences. All of these are, everything that we are, growing up, that we experience, it either builds character, it develops habits. Success is a period of habits that we've created through our lives, that we grow up, that we just learn. I mean, what do sports teach you? They teach you everything. They teach you work ethic, discipline, sacrifice, a sense of self. I mean, these are all such major qualities that are very easily applied to all things. They're applied to relationships. They're applied to business, to work, to family. I mean, what's a successful team of any kind if it doesn't have the same makings of a family, right? I mean, you could just do this all day long.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a roadmap. If you utilize it for what it is, it's a roadmap to fulfillment, to success. Sports for me were paramount. I mean, everything that I do, even today in business, started on a field, on a court, on a hill, all the same lessons. I'm just applying it in a different field or a different game, if you will. But the bricks that made up the foundation are critical. They're really essential.
Absolutely.
And I see a difference. I see a difference. I see a difference in kids that don't have that.
Yes,
That
totally.
never had that experience. I feel like they were denied a, a real critical life lesson, you
Mhm.
know? So I think it's important. I think
Yeah.
it's really important, you know, and I'm listen, every day I'm having fun. I'm loving it. You know, even the hard days I love
Yeah.
because they just make the good days that much better, you know?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So,
Well, Blake, this has been fantastic. Can you hang for a minute or two after we finish here?
yeah, sounds great. We'll do. My
Great.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you, sir.